Kia ora, na mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Welcome to another week of Lunch Money, brought to you by Sharesies. At Sharesies, our purpose is to create financial empowerment for all.
For those of you who are new to Lunch Money, we do these every Thursday at lunchtime. This is a place where you, as investors, can hear from the people leading some of the companies available on the Sharesies platform, as well as other investing experts.
Lunch Money is also available as a podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Please, if you're listening to this podcast, take a moment to leave a rating and comment on Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, Gus. And before we get into today's discussion, I do have a small legal disclaimer. Investing involves risks. You aren't guaranteed to make money and you might lose the money you start with. If you're looking for help with your investment choices, we recommend talking to a licensed financial advice provider. We won't be providing any personalized advice on this webinar. It'll all be general.
And finally, please be kind and respectful to all the speakers and also the fellow viewers on this podcast, because otherwise we will take steps to remove you from the webinar.
Cool. Today it's a bit different, this Lunch Money. We're approaching the end of the year, so we thought it'd be a good time to take a moment and reflect on what the year's been like here at Sharesies. We'll talk a bit about some of our 2021 milestones, and of course, we'll answer any of your questions. So please do put questions in the Ask a Question part of this beautiful interface. And and don't leave any questions in discussion because we may miss it and we really want to get to it. If you don't know, kia ora, I'm Brooke. I'm one of the co-founders, co-CEOs here at Sharesies, and I'm joined with Erin, who is our head of finance. Hi, Erin. And also I'm joined by
Hello,
Gus,
Erin.
who's our head of investments. Hey, Gus.
Hello.
So let's get into it. Erin, a lot has happened this year. What are the 3 key milestones for you?
It has been a huge year. But if I had to break it down into 3 milestones, I think the first thing that I'd be super proud of is just the growth that Sharesies has seen as a platform and the impact that we're having here. So we started the year with around 270,000 investors, and now we're up to 470,000. So we've added 200,000 Sharesies investors to our platform, which I'm just stoked with. And then on top of that, the funds that we have under management, so the value of all of our investors' portfolios on the platform, has grown by nearly $1 billion. So we now hold nearly $2 billion of funds on Sharesies, which again is just massive. And I'm so stoked to see that growth and also the progress that our investors are making. So back in 2020, the average investor portfolio was less than $2,000, and now it's over $4,000. So not only are we impacting more and more New Zealanders and Australians' lives, we're also seeing them grow their wealth over time, which I just couldn't be prouder of. And then the final thing that I'm just super stoked about is also how we've seen our Sharesies team grow. So we started the year with a team of around 100, and now we're up to something around 175. So I'm really proud of all the jobs that we're creating here with Sharesies, and that we're seeing all of this great new talent and energy come into the business.
Tuatuku, all of that, eh? It's been it's fantastic to see, people develop their wealth through Sharesies and also providing more jobs and opportunities here in Aotearoa and also Sydney. Thanks so much, Erin. What about you, Gus? What are your 3?
Well, my first one, and for 3 or 4, I think I've got 4. So we're about providing the same opportunity for someone with $5 and $5 million. So for me, it's been the increase in the amount of access that we'll be able to provide to lots more of different investments by Sharesies. So we've now got just over 8,200 investments on Sharesies that you can buy 1 cent at a time. So that means with 1 cent, you can buy a little bit of Tesla. With 1 cent, you can buy a little bit of main freight here in New Zealand. And part of one of the big increases here we have was ASX coming online. So we offer fractionalized access 1 cent at a time to ASX companies. So that was a first for Sharesies, which Sharesies did the first to fractionalize that. We also have American depository receipts on Sharesies now, which is a big thing. So they're a certain type of product on the US market. And finally, we've got 2 new types of funds on Sharesies. We've got the Takeover fund, which is a leading ethical and sustainable fund, which where they invest according to Te Ao Māori principles, and with PMG fund, which is our first a liquid or residential commercial property fund here in New Zealand. Something else I'm really proud of, and this is my other 3 things, is the new insights that we're giving through to our investors. So this comes in the form of Lunch Money speakers. So Lunch Money is this podcast, which is weekly, and this year we've featured CEOs from Rocket Lab, Genesis Energy, Z, Fletcher Building, Volpara, Somerset, Turners, Serco, Sky TV, and in a few weeks we're actually having the CEO of Air New Zealand along as well. So I'm sure that will be very exciting for a lot of our investors. In addition to that, we've upped the ante with our Lunch Money newsletters, which is on a Thursday. So now we're talking about Australian, New Zealand, and US markets 3 times a week. So if you're not already a subscriber, I really recommend being a subscriber to that. It's really cool news, punchy news there. And also we've implemented our Recap podcast, which is a daily business news podcast, when we're just approaching to 100 episodes of that. So it's about 12 minutes, and that comes online every evening at about 5:30. Awesome.
I love how there's so much in that, but my mind anchored to the first thing you said when we've got 8,206 investments. Like, I remember when we started Sharesies, we had 6 investments, we had 6, funds that we had on our platform, and now to see that access grow has been incredible over the last 4 years. But what also really is important to us is, as we provide more access to these opportunities, ensuring that we're helping build confidence and motivation and that sense of control when it comes to that. Yeah,
that was a big list, Gus, but I know, Brooke, you've got a whole bunch more stuff to add to it. What do you want to throw in there?
Oh, yeah, to add, I think it's been a massive year, a lot of, outside of Sharesies, and also in like a lot of highs and lows too. It's been a real challenging, but ultimately really rewarding year. One thing I'm really stoked about is, ever since we started Sharesies, we knew that there was more opportunity, financial empowerment across the ditch too. So it's really great that this year we launched in Australia. I actually moved to Australia in April and came back and did MIQ with my 2 kids in August. But that was an incredible experience, and I was in lockdown for a big chunk of it. But just being able to help get the team and the office set up there, and really, really understand more about what our part can be in terms of creating financial empowerment in Australia. And there's so much more to do there. So it's been really cool to see that grow and build some relationships and partnerships like we have with She's on the Money and girls that invest here too. In terms of our product, in a big thing that we launched this year in April was access to the Australian Stock Exchange. And that was really, really exciting. And like Gus said, we're the first in the world that's offering the Australian Stock Exchange and the New Zealand Stock Exchange with absolutely no minimum and fractionalizing it, as to say. And so it's fantastic to be able to create access to these opportunities that are out there. We did add watch list too this year, which has been a super requested feature, and it's great for people to see the uptake there and how people are being able to kind of help shape their portfolio for the future through keeping their eyes on a few things. And as Gus mentioned, we started offering ADRs, and we launched our new look of our portfolio, which I was super stoked with. I love that fruit basket, It's like when it starts, when you start Sharesies, it's empty, and then when you fill it up, it gets a whole bunch of fruit in it. And I think things like that, how we really care about creating lovable experiences and just bringing the joy into the experience is really cool. So I loved all the work that people did there, not only in terms of those visual elements, but also the mahi that went behind all of the return calculations and making that super transparent so people can really break down what their returns are and how they've come about. I think that's really, really cool. And it was a big piece of work that our team did to really turn that around. We also got 2FA out there, stoked about that. That's something that was heavily requested, and it's great to have that live now. And just last month too, we improved the keyboard accessibility too for Sharesies, so it's way more easier to do keys to navigate Sharesies, which is fantastic. I was also really stoked with our team. We launched our new websites, and this might this, this is actually quite big because it's beautiful and it's really easy to navigate. But we've also now, after 5 years, migrated off Squarespace onto something else. And that was a fantastic platform when we started, but we definitely ended up having to help figure out how it could grow with us. So that's awesome. And a big part of what we're doing too is really strengthened our onboarding process. And we've done a lot of work there and got more to do, but really, really excited about helping make sure we're continually and always doing our part to reduce money laundering out there in the world and making sure keep our platform safe. And we've had great custody audits and all that sort of jazz since then. And that's really important to us as a fintech and a regtech. And then another thing that happened this year is we became carbon neutral here in Aotearoa, and we'll provide more details at some point. But it's really great to be able to make sure we're doing our part to not impact our environment in a negative way. And so we're working, making sure we continue to improve our global footprint and reduce that over time. So a lot has happened. One thing we probably should talk about, Erin, is our recent capital raise. So Shareises, we raised $50 million, which I really want to thank all the shareholders and people who have supported us. I think it's really worth us going into this a bit, Erin, and and having a chat about why we've done this and who we've brought on.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this. So we just raised $50 million. We wrapped up our capital raise at the end of October, so not too long ago now. And we raised money basically to fund the future growth of Sharesies. So Sharesies as a company isn't focused on making a profit at the moment. So we operate at a loss. And we do that because we're trying to capitalize the growth ahead of us. And we want to grow this business as quickly as possible so we can make sure that we deliver on our purpose of creating financial empowerment. And to do that, we operate at a loss. And that means that capital raising is important to us because it means that we can top up our bank account and bring more cash into the business. And with that cash, we can grow our team, which means we can work on more products and deliver more to our investors. And it also means that we can spend more on stuff like marketing, so we can acquire more investors and add more investors to our platform, both in New Zealand and Australia as well. So that's basically what kicked off the process for us. We wanted to bring more money into Sharesies to make sure that we were super well funded and we could make the most of all the opportunities available to us. So we kicked off a capital raise. And we had over $50 million committed, and that came from both existing shareholders that have invested in us in the past and also a few new shareholders, both in New Zealand and overseas. And it was a really cool experience. Brooke and I went and spoke to a bunch of people, and we were able to tell them about the Sharesies story and what our plans were for the future. And we got a great response. Everyone was really excited about the impact that we're having here and also the future impact that they see us having. And yeah, they were keen to invest and keen to contribute money to this journey and help us out with having those great impacts that we're aiming for.
Yeah, fantastic. It's really awesome to have so much support and so many people that are so purpose driven and really care about what we're doing and how we go about it too. So really excited about that. And as we look ahead, as you mentioned, making sure that we're doing what we can, not only to provide access to these awesome investment opportunities and money opportunities, but really helping people feel really confident and motivated to continue on their wealth development journey. It's really, really exciting. I'm also, I think, what'll be really cool coming up next year is more in terms of what we can be doing more in the community and building partnerships there. So really looking forward to seeing how we can really get more involved in more and more communities across Aotearoa and Australia. Gus, anything you're thinking about for the new year, for 2022?
I think I'm thinking about something a lot of our investors have been waiting for a while, which is an app, a mobile app. So we're currently looking to deliver an app, and I think some of our staff already have had the opportunity to check it out. We're also looking for more auto invest, so we know our investors want to be able to invest in companies via auto invest. So we're currently scoping out what that looks like, and also auto invest for our Australian customers, hopefully in the very short term, which is exciting. There's a bunch of other things you've been asking for as well, which are very clear on our radar, which is voting is another one. Dividend reinvestment plans, what that could look like via Sharesies. We're also looking how to connect companies through to you. So the investments that you own can talk to you as an investor, whether it be company announcements, more capital raises, etc. So yeah, the other thing is new markets. So currently, as Brooke said, we're currently in New Zealand and Australia, and we're thinking about where there's other jurisdictions where Sharesies could one day be, and more customer bases to empower. Yeah, over to you, Erin.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking a little bit further ahead, and I'm really thinking about how we can continue to deliver on our purpose and help people with their overall wealth development. So with Sharesies, we've kind of started with investing, but there's so much more to building people's wealth. And I'm really keen to see how Sharesies can fit into that wealth development journey. And help people more and more with their financial well-being. So kind of that's a bit of a watch this space. We just know that there's so much more we could do, and we're keen to prioritize the right things for our investors.
Yeah, so let's get into some of the questions we've got. And Gus, you touched on one just before, which is the highest ranked one. And I could take this one, which is, when will We Share Sharesies app be available for us, especially since Australia already has it? This is a great question. So we've just been building out our mobile team in the last few months, and it's great to have awesome people thinking about this and putting it into action. So we're hoping to have an app out in Aotearoa this year, and it's not too far off, which is super exciting. So keep an eye out for that, and always feel free to message us at help@sharesies.com saying I'd love to get the app, and we can make sure you definitely know about it. Another way that we do help in the meantime is adding it to your home screen as an option. The app we've got in Australia, and this will be the same as when we first launched in Aotearoa, it'll be a wrapper app. So it'll be kind of taking what our existing experience is like on the web and making that more mobile friendly. But in future, we can see that we might move to more of a native so that it's got a bit of a different flow too. So it's really exciting to have a team that can help shaping what that could look like. So it's coming. The next question we've got is, when can we buy Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, the biggest in the world and listed in the US under the ticker GBTC, and their Ethereum Trust ETHE? Gus, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Good question. So we've been keeping an eye on the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. Firstly, we onboard everything that's listed in the markets across US, New Zealand, and Australia. This Grayscale Bitcoin Trust is not listed in the States. It's on an OTC market, so an over-the-counter market. I think some of our investors have been interested in a similar type product, which is the Beta or the ProShares Bitcoin strategy. So maybe look at that one if you're looking for some kind of cryptocurrency exposure in the States. But again, it's a listed product. And same with Ethereum, the Ethereum Trust.
So there's two crypto-based exchange traded funds we offer through our platform at the moment. One from the US and one from based on the Australian Stock Exchange, right? Yeah.
So the one is the BITO on the which is on the Nasdaq, and there's also, which is linked to Bitcoin futures to try and get the price, follow the price of cryptocurrency. And there's also a ETF on the ASX called what's the Beta Shares Crypto ETF, and that one invests in companies which are related to cryptocurrency rather than listed companies related to cryptocurrency rather than the cryptocurrency itself. Cool. So yeah, there are two options out there.
Thanks for that. I'm keen to know more about the rumoured floating of Sharesies on the stock exchange, please, and the prospect of a preferential pool of shares for Sharesies members. Erin, do you want to take that, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I can take that, and you can chip in. So we've just completed that $50 million capital raise, and we did that capital raise privately, which meant that we could provide access to wholesale investors, and that meant that we couldn't offer it to Sharesies investors who are retail investors this time round. And every time we do a capital raise, we consider whether it's best for us as a business to raise privately or publicly on like a listed exchange. So that's a decision that we'll make every time we need to raise capital. And at the time, we'll assess whether it's best for us as a company to do it privately and publicly. And the things that might feed into that decision is how Sharesies is performing as a company at the time, and also how the markets are performing, and what kind of valuations we think we might get under each scenario. So it's a little bit of a fork in the road, and when we go to raise capital, we'll consider what suits us best, which means we don't have a firm timeline at the moment for when we might look to raise, but it is something that we're really interested in and thinking about all the time. And when we do that, we really want to give our Shareises investors the opportunity to participate as well.
Great. Would Sharesies people be able to attend AGMs? What's your take on that, Gus?
Yeah, so if you're interested in attending an AGM, you can reach out to our investor care team, who will be able to help you with that process. Often they'll be able to give you a code to be able to log into any AGM, particularly with NZX companies, and we should be able to figure out with ASX companies as well. So yeah, reach out to the team. And
so an AGM is an annual general meeting, which happens annually, and this is where companies get their shareholders together, or have a kind of a meeting with their shareholders where they might pass some resolutions, like voting on the directors of that company and their auditors and things like that, and also get a bit of an update on what that company's future plans are. Other ways that we get exposure to that information sometimes is through lunch money when we interview companies too. So company CEOs. So that's another way we can get access to some of that information more regularly.
And we've started interviewing some on Recap as well, I think. So if you want to tune into a Recap episode after a results announcement, you might hear from the CEO there as well.
Yeah, good point. Recap is something we put out every day, every weekday around 5 p.m. on all those podcast places. And it takes the financial news of the day and makes it really easy to digest and kind of see how it relates to your or to investing. And it's really fun and humorous too. I really enjoy it. Is there any plans for Sharesies to open up access to other stock exchanges? Gus?
Yes, there are. Where it's just a matter of when. So we've got lots of stuff we want to do, and we take lots of requests from our customers. So we're actively looking at different investment opportunities to provide access to. Do we have a specific exchange locked in at the moment? No, we don't. But we're definitely looking at a few as and how we might do them in the future.
Yeah, so Mike, if there's any specific exchange you're interested in, or anybody that's listening today, feel free to message us at help@sharesies.com. Let us know, and we tag that, make sure we track that, and can look at how we work on that in the future. Another quick question involving exchange traded funds, ETFs. In an ETF such as the New Zealand Top 50 Fund, it lists companies such as Fisher & Paykel, A2 Milk, and other companies as their top companies. How often do these funds update the companies that they decide to invest in, as they are not actively managed?
That's a great question. Thanks, James. So generally, we have an exchange traded fund follows a benchmark or an index. So there will be an index, which is a list of companies, which is by an independent provider, and they'll say these are the top 50 companies, or these are the top 200 companies, or there are a list of companies, and that index might be updated quarterly, annually, semi-annually. The ETF looks to track that index, that list of companies, to try and get the same return, or maybe even slightly better in some case, return that index. The ETF provider can do whatever they want and trade however they want to try and track that index. So to answer your question, the index or the list of companies and how big they are, or how much the size of the ETF changes through time, and the provider can regulate like every quarter or so, whereas the ETF can change constantly. That's up to the provider.
Great, thanks for that.
Often it's algorithms to drive that. Yeah.
Erin, one for you. Do you have a view of when you want to become profitable?
Do we have a view? It's definitely not a plan for the short term. We still see a lot of growth ahead of us, and we think that running at a loss is the best thing for the business right now. Our long-term strategy would be that we'd be keen to be a profitable company, as all companies want to be. But I definitely don't see that in our immediate future. I think that it's better for our business and better for delivering on our purpose and our strategy to continue running at a loss for now.
Great. I've got a question here. Why Sharesies doesn't offer Sharesies customers to invest money into Sharesies? So, Tong, this is something we would love to be able to do. There's some legislation that makes it a bit tricky, which is this thing called it's like for small offers that you can only raise up to 2 million from people who aren't considered to be wholesale investors. And so that's one thing. There are ways that other people can get around that, such as like crowd equity, or obviously listing. And those are things we've thought about and explored. But in order for Sharesies to be able to keep moving and delivering our purpose, and at this stage, it was really about making sure we could like get that money a bit more quicker and not have to invest too much in terms of the campaign in order to be able to make that happen. But it is something we would love to do and do want to do. So we'll let you know when we can. I've got another question here. Are there any thoughts on if the OTC stocks could be offered? And maybe just explain a bit about what OTC stocks are, Gus.
So currently we offer our main offering is listed exchanges. So we've got the ASX in Australia, NZX here in New Zealand, and CBO, the NASDAQ, and the NYSE, New York Stock Exchange in the States. The OTC OTC exchanges are more of the unlisted exchange. They're a slightly different a market for buying and selling of shares. Generally, there's not as much liquidity in these exchanges, and they're not a kind of a centralized place. However, we do have an understanding that there is going to be an easier way of offering this type of market through to our investors in the future. But that is not something that's going to be happening this year. And we'd need to weigh a decision to do like an OTC offering up with other exchanges like the London Stock Exchange or the Toronto Stock Exchange or the Catalyst Exchange here in New Zealand, for example. So we have thought about it, and we have had requests from our investors, but it's not currently on the roadmap.
And will we see on our current roadmap? Got a question here in terms of will we see more managed funds on Sharesies?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think some of the eagle-eyed amongst you would have seen we did a survey of the Sharesies Share Club Facebook page recently to find out what fund managers they're interested in. And resoundingly, Milford was the most interesting to our investors. So yeah, we're looking at doing that in the short term. Yeah. Cool. So yes, you will in time. We've added a few this year. In the future, there will definitely be more. Until then, look at the ETFs or the actively managed ETFs that are available in the exchanges, because they offer a similar product, but just with more liquidity, easier to buy and sell. However, we want to bring the big names, New Zealand names, to you at some point.
And getting a bit taxy here, is there a different tax rate for kids accounts buying into New Zealand company shares outside kids accounts managed funds? Many thanks.
Oh, that's to me.
Yeah, you go.
So the key difference here is when you receive dividends from the funds. So that's cash that's paid back to an investors. So there's often an advantage with managed funds. Kids or lower income earners are charged at a different tax rate. They're from multi-rate pie, and so that's the advantage for kids going through managed funds. They'll potentially get a lower tax rate. But look at our blogs on the website, and there's some really good information around multi-rate pies and different tax rates for kids through managed funds. So yeah, and our kids auto invest pre-made order is set up in a way to take advantage of those lower tax rates for kids. So check that out too.
Cool. Will Sharesies be looking at releasing their own software that can provide trends indicators on any share or fund one might be looking at? Our investors are always looking for more information, and we always get requests for more information and way to find out new opportunities and new things to invest in. And so constantly through time, we're looking to increase the data that we have available to our investors. And I'll just actually jump in. There's another question just below this because it's linked. It's how far away will your dividend reinvestment via Sharesies be? And so an example of an above question, which is providing better data versus bringing dividend reinvestments or bringing voting. So we're voting onto Sharesies. So we've got a bunch of these different projects that we all need to kind of prioritize against each other. So making our own software is still sitting behind the likes of voting and dividend reinvestment, but looking to improve through time. Cool. Thanks so much. Now we've got a question about somebody who wants to know what happens to their shares if they pass away. what happens to their portfolio and shares. Do either of you want to take that? No. So we'll get a little link, Kira, in our, you'll see, we'll share a link that just gives a bit of an update on that. In our help center, we've got heaps of questions that answer that, but we really want to make sure that that is a seamless process based on, what you've got set up past, when you do pass on. So that's there.
Reach out to our team.
So when is a Sharesies share issue coming on the NZX ASX? So we've answered that question. And the final question we've got here is, do any of you have any thoughts on the implications of the long term for the takeover bid for Sydney Airport? Oh, a few more questions coming.
I can handle that one. So a takeover bid for any company is basically a party that is looking to buy all of the shares and take over the company. And so the people that help to make that decision or advise on that decision are the directors of the company, because you as a shareholder have directors which represents you and your interests. And so the directors basically come to a view around whether they think it's a good call or not, and then often it goes to a shareholder vote. So in this case with Sydney Airport, there's been a 24 billion, and I'm just reading this off a Google article beside here, but there's been a $24 billion takeover bid, and the board has agreed to it. And I'm not sure if it goes to a shareholder vote, but if it's successful, all those shares will be bought by this different company, and you as a shareholder will be paid out by Sharesies for any shares that you own.
Great. Got a few more questions that popped in. Would occasional selling of shares deem one as a trader in the eyes of IRD and therefore create extra tax implications? Erin or Gus?
Yeah, we can't really provide tax advice to you on this one, so it really depends on your own individual circumstances, and would definitely recommend talking to an advisor if you have any concerns about what you're doing. But essentially it looks at the tax laws look at what your intention was when you first purchased the shares. And if you purchase those shares with the intention of selling them and making a profit, then it's quite likely that you should be paying tax on those shares. So if you're in that kind of situation, would definitely recommend doing some more research.
Awesome. And we have a question here in the chat. Can Sharesies add shares on US companies, ETFs not included into an offer from your Drive Wealth broker? Gus?
I think the question there is, are there companies from US listed exchanges which we aren't offering, and why not? And so the way that Sharesies is able to offer access through to the US markets is we work with an execution broker that's based out of the States called Drive Wealth. So we try to offer access to everything that Drive Wealth offers access to. Drive Wealth elects not to offer access to some things, and this is generally because a company is very small, or potentially there's not much trading on the market, so there's no buyers when you want to sell or no sellers when you want to buy. So that will generally be the reason why we won't be able to offer access to a certain company. But if you have any request, reach out to the team. The request will come through to my team, and we'll try and find it for you, or tell you why we can't if we can't.
Cool.
There's also a question there. Are you going to add? I'll just jump in there. Sorry, Brooke. Are you going to add European shares in the near future? And I think that's one we've kind of covered. It's not in the near future, but it's one of those exchanges from Europe that we are looking at, and we're thinking about in which order we want to do them. Yeah.
Cool. And we've answered that top one too. So the last question I've got at the moment is, how are you staying ahead of your competitors? So, Sharesies, we launched in Aotearoa 4 years ago. We've been going for 5 now, and we just started in Australia. There's so much more for us to do, but really we're focused on wealth development. How do we help people build their wealth over time with amounts they can afford? We really care about creating the most lovable place for people to grow their wealth to. And we've got a real core generosity of spirit in our culture, where we really, really care about creating financial empowerment. And so I think the things that we focus on, the way that we really are tapped into listening to people and making sure that we're really, really creating something that is lovable to them, ultimately enables us to really thrive. And I think, being a B Corp too, we are a business that is a force for good and really think about ourselves in a real holistic way. And I think that is a real key difference too. And we're just, we're quite different in that way. And I think that that's quite exciting and really impactful. Well, kia ora. Thanks so much for all those questions, and thanks heaps for coming today. I'm not sure, Erin, Gus, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
We could add in one last plug for Recap, our daily podcast. So if you want to learn more or keep up to date with the financial news, we publish a daily podcast every weekday around 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. It's around 10 minutes long, and you can access it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. And it's a fantastic listen. So I'd recommend tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think I've got to do the old plug say. But we just hit over 50,000 listens or something too, and it hasn't been going long. So massive kudos to the team. And I think, thanks so much to you both for joining me. And I really just want to give a big shout out to everybody who's part of our Sharesies journey here at, our team, our shareholders, our stakeholders, everybody that's listening today, our investors. You're all helping us do this, and we're only doing this for each of you. So thank you so much. It's been a real blast this year, and I can't wait to have even more of an impact next year and get to know more of you too. So until then, have a great week. Please stay safe, and ka kite anō.